something impossible just happened. Donald Trump has publicly embarrassed European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in what people close to the situation are calling the worst diplomatic breakdown in Western history. This is not a disagreement about rules. This is not a trade deal gone bad. This is the complete and total destruction of the friendship between America and Europe that has kept the Western world together for 8 decades. And what happens in the next 72 hours will decide whether Europe survives as an economic power or falls into a mess of chaos that will destroy millions of lives. Trump did not just reject von der Leyen's ideas, he destroyed them. He walked out of an important meeting that European leaders thought would save their economies from disaster. He left her standing alone in front of world media with no answers, no choices, and no way forward. Right now, emergency meetings are being held in Berlin, Paris, and Rome, because European leaders know that this is not just a setback, this is an execution. And the countdown to economic disaster has already begun. For 75 years, the relationship between Washington and Brussels was considered untouchable. It was the foundation upon which the entire modern Western world was built. American military strength defending European borders, American money flowing into European businesses, American leadership protecting European interests on every continent and in every international organization. This was not a partnership between equals. This was a guarantee purchased with American blood and American money. Europe built its comfortable social democracies, its large welfare systems, its month-long vacations, and 35-hour work weeks because America was paying the bill for European security. European nations could afford to spend barely 1% of their national budgets on defense instead of the 5 or 6% that would actually be needed to protect themselves from outside threats. Because American soldiers were standing guard on European soil. American aircraft carriers were patrolling European waters. American intelligence agencies were watching European enemies. American nuclear weapons were stopping Russian aggression and preventing another terrible European war. This arrangement worked smoothly for generations because American presidents from both political parties believed it served America's strategic interests to keep the system going. They believed that a stable, wealthy, unified Europe was worth the huge financial cost America was bearing. They believed the friendship between America and Europe alliance was more valuable than the economic sacrifices American workers and American taxpayers were making to support it. But Donald Trump never believed any of that story. From the moment he announced his first presidential campaign in 2015, Trump made it very clear that he viewed the American-European relationship as completely unfair and deeply unfair to American interests. He called NATO an old organization that served European interests while draining American resources. He demanded that European nations immediately increase their defense spending to meet their treaty obligations. He threatened to pull out American troops stationed in Germany and other European nations. He put harsh tariffs on European steel and aluminum that hurt European manufacturing sectors. He left the Paris Climate Agreement that European leaders had spent years of diplomatic effort negotiating. But those actions were just warning shots fired across Europe's bow. Those were signs of the storm that was gathering on the horizon. What happened 72 hours ago was not a warning. It was a statement that the old order has been destroyed and will never return. Ursula von der Leyen arrived in Washington carrying what she believed was a complete package of ideas that would satisfy Trump's demands while keeping European independence and protecting European economic interests. She brought detailed promises on increased defense spending. She brought new trade ideas designed to reduce the huge trade imbalance between Europe and America. She brought pledges to buy more American energy exports and reduce European dependence on Russian natural gas. She brought promises to change European digital rules that American technology companies have complained about for years. She came prepared with concessions that previous European leaders would never have considered offering. She believed she had done everything possible to meet Trump halfway and create a foundation for constructive dialogue. She was terribly wrong about everything. According to multiple sources with direct knowledge of what happened inside that meeting, the atmosphere was hostile from the moment van der Leyen entered the room. Trump did not extend his hand for a customary handshake. He did not engage in the diplomatic pleasantries that typically open high-level international meetings. He did not ask about her flight or inquire about the situation facing European leaders. Instead, he immediately launched into what witnesses described as the most aggressive and confrontational opening statement any European leader has ever received from an American president. Trump began by systematically destroying every assumption that has governed relations between America and Europe for the past 7 decades. He stated clearly and without qualification that America would no longer tolerate being economically exploited by European nations that refuse to pay for their own defense. He declared that the era of American patience with European excuses and European delays had permanently ended. He told van der Leyen directly that Europe had taken advantage of American generosity for far too long, and that the bill for decades of European freeloading was now due in full. What Trump said next has sent absolute panic rippling through every European capital and every European financial center. He informed van der Leyen that he was rejecting her proposals completely and comprehensively, not because they were not enough, not because they needed changes, but because Trump has decided that negotiation itself is no longer an option that serves American interests. He told her that America was finished asking Europe to change its behavior. America was finished waiting for Europe to meet its commitments. America was finished paying for European prosperity, while American workers suffered and American industries died. From this moment forward, and Trump declared America would simply act on its own to protect American interests regardless of the consequences for Europe. And those consequences, he made clear, would be absolutely devastating. Van der Leyen attempted to respond. She tried to explain the complex political realities facing European leaders. She tried to outline the economic constraints that prevent rapid increases in military spending. She tried to describe the delicate balance European nations must maintain between American partnership and European sovereignty. Trump cut her off mid-sentence. He told her that he was not interested in hearing explanations or justifications or context. The time for talking had ended. The time for action had arrived, and America was going to act with or without European cooperation. Well, what happened next is what triggered the absolute crisis that is now unfolding across Europe in real time. Trump stood up from his chair and walked out of the meeting. He left van der Leyen sitting alone with her staff and her proposals and her carefully prepared talking points that would never be discussed or considered or even acknowledged. He simply ended the meeting on his own and left without another word. European diplomats present in the room described the scene as surreal and terrifying. Van der Leyen sat frozen in silence for several minutes, apparently unable to process what had just occurred. When she finally stood and left the building, cameras captured images of her face that revealed absolute shock and devastation. Within hours, the Trump administration released a statement that has confirmed Europe's worst fears and triggered emergency response protocols across the continent. The statement announced that the United States was immediately suspending all high-level diplomatic engagement with European Union institutions indefinitely. No more meetings between American cabinet officials and European commissioners. No more phone calls between the White House and Brussels. No more coordination on trade policy, security matters, climate initiatives, or any other issue of mutual concern. Just complete silence. But the statement did not stop there. It went on to announce that within 30 days, the Trump administration would begin implementing what it called a comprehensive recalibration of American-European economic relations. The language was deliberately vague and ominous. It did not specify what this recalibration would involve. It did not outline timelines or processes or opportunities for European input. It simply declared that fundamental changes were coming and that Europe would have no voice in determining what those changes would be. European stock markets immediately went into freefall when this statement was released. The euro currency dropped to its lowest value against the dollar in over a decade within hours of the announcement. Emergency cabinet meetings were convened in Berlin, Paris, Rome, Madrid, and every other major European capital as leaders scrambled to understand what Trump was planning and how Europe could possibly respond. But here's what makes this crisis unprecedented and potentially unsurvivable for European unity. Nobody knows what Trump is actually planning to do. The statement provided no details about what this recalibration means in practical terms. Will Trump impose massive tariffs that destroy European exports to America? Will he withdraw American troops from European soil and leave Europe defenseless against Russian aggression? Will he cancel American security guarantees that have prevented war in Europe for 75 years? Will he forge bilateral deals with individual European nations that break European unity and destroy Brussels' authority? European leaders are operating in complete darkness with no information and no communication channels and no ability to negotiate or influence what is coming. And Trump has deliberately created this situation because uncertainty and fear serve his strategic objectives perfectly. But what we have discovered through sources inside the Trump transition team reveals that what is coming is far worse than anything European leaders are currently imagining. And when you understand what Trump is actually planning, you will realize why this moment represents the end of Europe as we have known it for the past 8 decades. Will Europe's economy collapse before leaders even understand what hit them? Or does Trump have something even more destructive planned that will tear the European Union apart from within? The document that Trump's team has been preparing in absolute secrecy contains demands so extreme that European officials who have seen leaked portions are describing it as a declaration of economic war disguised as trade policy. This is not a negotiation document. This is a list of non-negotiable ultimatums backed by threats so severe that compliance may be impossible, but resistance would be suicidal. The first demand targets the very foundation of European economic power. Trump is requiring that the European Union immediately dismantle all regulatory frameworks that discriminate against American companies operating in European markets. This means ending antitrust investigations into Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple. This means canceling the Digital Services Act that took years to negotiate. This means abandoning privacy protections that European citizens have fought decades to establish. But the demand goes even further into territory that strikes at the heart of European sovereignty. Trump is demanding that individual European nations be permitted to negotiate separate bilateral trade agreements directly with Washington, rather than being forced to negotiate collectively through Brussels. This single requirement would destroy the European Union's power as a unified trading bloc overnight. If Germany can cut its own deal with America, why would Berlin follow Brussels regulations that harm German industry? If France can secure special protections for its farmers, why would Paris sacrifice French agriculture for European solidarity? Trump is not just demanding policy changes. He is demanding the systematic destruction of European unity itself, and he is betting that when European nations face economic annihilation, they will abandon Brussels and save themselves. The question is not whether some nations will break ranks. Thus, the question is, which nation breaks first and triggers the stampede that destroys everything? But economic fragmentation is only the beginning of Trump's plan to reshape Europe. Because what he is demanding on the military front would require European societies to fundamentally transform in ways that could trigger political revolutions across the continent. The military spending requirement Trump has embedded in his demands is not just ambitious, it is designed to be impossible. Trump is requiring every European nation to immediately increase defense spending to 5% of GDP within 12 months. For context, most European nations currently spend barely 1% on military budgets. The United States itself spends approximately 3.5%. And Trump is demanding that Europe spend significantly more than America, while simultaneously dealing with the economic chaos his tariffs and trade restrictions will create. For Germany, this means finding an additional 120 billion euros every single year. For France, over 90 billion. For Italy and Spain, nations already drowning in debt with youth unemployment above 30%. This requirement would mean completely gutting healthcare systems, education budgets, and pension programs to fund massive military expansion. Hospitals would close, schools would lose teachers, retirement payments would be slashed. But tanks and fighter jets and naval vessels would be purchased by the thousands because Donald Trump has demanded it and attached consequences to disobedience that no European leader can survive politically. This is not a defense policy. This is a mechanism designed to force European governments to choose between American demands and their own populations. And when those governments choose compliance over their citizens' welfare, the political backlash will be catastrophic. But here is what makes this crisis absolutely unprecedented. The 30-day clock Trump set is not counting down to negotiation. It is counting down to implementation. When that deadline expires, Trump will not ask Europe if it is ready to comply. He will simply begin imposing the consequences he has already prepared. 60% tariffs on automobiles, 50% on luxury goods, complete suspension of American security cooperation, withdrawal of intelligence sharing, cancellation of NATO commitments, the systematic destruction of every pillar supporting European prosperity and security. Europe has no good options remaining. Compliance means economic and political upheaval that could destroy governments. Resistance means immediate economic collapse that could trigger a depression worse than anything Europe experienced in the 1930s. The Western Alliance, as we have known it for 75 years, is ending right now. Subscribe immediately and turn on notifications because when this deadline hits, we are bringing you emergency coverage with classified information the mainstream media will never reveal. Comment below with your prediction. Will Europe surrender to Trump's demands or watch their economy burn? Share this video with everyone who needs to understand what is coming because the world is changing right now and you cannot afford to be unprepared for what happens next.